The North Carolina sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Bragg's outdoor rifle range, the heat shimmering off the concrete in visible waves. Sarah Chen adjusted her army cap and took a deep breath before stepping through the chain-link gate. The metallic click of the latch closing behind her felt final, like crossing a threshold into enemy territory. She was immediately aware of the eyes, dozens of them. The range was packed with shooters preparing for the inter-service marksmanship competition, the kind of event that drew the military's best and most arrogant. Broad-shouldered Marines checked their scopes with swagger. Army Rangers traded stories about their tightest groupings. Even a few Navy SEALs lounged against equipment cases, their relaxed postures screaming confidence. Then there was Sarah, 5'3" of what her grandmother called bird bones. At 28, she'd been in the Army for 6 years, but she knew what they saw, a petite Asian woman who looked like she'd blow away in a strong wind. "You lost, sweetheart," a corporal with a thick Texas drawl called out. "The admin building's back that way." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah kept walking, her boots crunching on the gravel, heading straight for the equipment desk where Sergeant Major Brooks, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, was logging weapons. "Specialist Chen, reporting for qualifier registration," she said, her voice steady. Brooks looked up, his eyebrows rising. He glanced at his clipboard, then back at her as if expecting her to be taller when he looked again. "Chen, right, you're in lane 7. Grab an M4 from the standard rack." "Actually, sir, I'd like to request access to the competition-grade rifles." Sarah kept her expression neutral, professional. The sergeant major's laugh started deep in his belly and erupted like a cannon blast. "Little lady, those weapons have a kick that'll put you on your back. We're talking Barrett M82s, Macmillan TAC-50s. These aren't toys." "I'm aware, sir. I'm still requesting access." Brooks shook his head, still chuckling. "Listen, honey, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but those rifles weigh more than you do. Why don't you start with something you can actually handle, and if you qualify?" "I'll qualify." Sarah's voice didn't rise, but something in her tone made Brooks pause. Before he could respond, a captain standing nearby interjected. "Oh, this I gotta see. Let her try, Sergeant Major. When she lands on her ass, maybe she'll learn to stay in her lane." More laughter. Sarah felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but she'd learned long ago to channel it, to let it fuel her focus rather than cloud it. She signed the standard equipment roster without another word. As she walked toward lane 7, comments followed her like gnats. "Bet she can't even lift the rifle." $20 says she doesn't make it through the first round." "Someone get a medic ready." "Hey, Chen," a Marine Lance Corporal called out, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "You sure you don't want to start with a .22? Maybe work your way up to the big girl guns." His buddies erupted in laughter, slapping each other's backs. Sarah didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge them. Every step toward lane 7 was measured, deliberate. She'd walked this path before, not literally but metaphorically. The path of being underestimated, dismissed, treated like a novelty rather than a soldier. At lane 7, she set down her gear bag with careful precision. The rifle waiting for her was a standard M4 carbine, 5.56 mm, effective range around 500 meters with the right shooter behind it. It was a weapon she could field strip blindfolded, a weapon she'd qualified expert with every year since basic training. But it wasn't what she needed. It wasn't built for the distances she could reach. Sarah ran her hands over the M4, checking it with practiced efficiency. Chamber clear, barrel clean, sights properly zeroed for the range's standard 300-meter targets. Everything was in order, exactly as it should be. First time at a real competition specialist. The shooter in lane 6, a staff sergeant with Ranger tabs on his shoulder, leaned over with a patronizing smile. "Don't worry if you don't make the cut. Most people don't, especially people who..." He gestured vaguely at her, as if her entire existence was the punchline to a joke. "I'll be fine," Sarah replied evenly. "Sure, sure. Just saying there's no shame in not being built for this kind of work. Some people are natural shooters and some people are, well, better suited for other things. Support roles, you know." Sarah turned to face him fully. "What's your name, Staff Sergeant?" "Kowalski, why?" Just wanted to remember it. She allowed herself the smallest smile, for later. Kowalski frowned, not sure if he'd been insulted or not. Before he could respond, the range officer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "All shooters, listen up. We've got 32 competitors today running standard qualification courses. 300 meters, 15 rounds, you know the drill. Top 16 advance to tomorrow's competition rounds. Weather conditions: temperature 82 degrees, humidity 67%, wind from the southeast at 10 to 12 miles per hour with gusts to 15. Adjust accordingly." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, processing the information. Southeast wind meant the rounds would drift left and slightly high. At 300 meters with these conditions, she'd need to aim approximately 8 inches right and 2 inches low to compensate. The calculations ran through her mind automatically, effortlessly. When she opened her eyes, she caught Kowalski watching her with amusement. "You okay there, specialist? You look a little stressed." "Just thinking," Sarah said. "Dangerous habit," he replied with a smirk. "Try not to overthink it, just point and shoot." Point and shoot. If only it were that simple. But Sarah had learned long ago that precision marksmanship was never simple. It was mathematics and physics, biology and psychology, art and science merged into a discipline that demanded everything from its practitioners. She loaded her magazine with smooth, practiced movements. Each round clicked into place with satisfying certainty. 30 rounds total, 15 for the qualification, 15 for backup. The ammunition was standard military issue, not match grade, but it would do. As she settled into position behind the rifle, Sarah became aware of the continued commentary around her. "Probably can't even see over the scope properly. Diversity checkbox, you know how it is. Give her credit for trying, I guess." The words bounced off her like rain off stone. She'd heard it all before. In basic training, where drill sergeants had assumed she'd wash out in the first week. In combat medic school, where instructors had questioned whether she had the physical strength for the job. In Germany, where her unit had treated her like a mascot rather than a soldier. She'd proved them wrong every single time. The rifle stock settled against her shoulder with familiar comfort. Her cheek found its natural position against the stock's rest. Her right eye aligned with the scope, bringing the distant target into sharp focus. Her breathing slowed, deepened, became rhythmic and controlled. This was her place, not despite the mockery but because of it. Every doubt, every dismissal, every condescending comment had forged her into something harder, sharper, more determined. The range officer's voice cut through her focus. "Shooters, you may commence when ready." Sarah's finger found the trigger. The metal was warm from the sun but smooth, familiar. She took one more breath, let half of it out, and held. The world narrowed to a single point, the target 300 meters downrange. She exhaled the rest of her breath and squeezed with steady, even pressure. The first shot cracked through the humid air, sharp and clear. The rifle's recoil pushed against her shoulder, manageable, expected. Through the scope she watched the impact, dead center. She cycled the bolt, loaded the next round, settled back into position. Same breath pattern, same trigger squeeze, same result. Dead center. Again and again and again. By the 5th shot, the mockery around her had quieted slightly. By the 10th shot, shooters in nearby lanes were glancing over, distracted from their own targets. By the 15th shot, there was an unusual silence spreading across the range. Sarah cleared her weapon, set it down carefully, and stood. Her shoulder ached slightly from the recoil, 15 rounds in quick succession always left a mark, but her hands were steady, her breathing controlled. She'd done this part 1,000 times. The hard part was yet to come. The range officer activated the target retrieval system, and the paper targets at 300 meters began their mechanical journey back to the firing line. All around the range, shooters were doing the same, most looking satisfied with their performance. When Sarah's target arrived, she unclipped it and held it up to the light. 15 holes, all within a 3-inch circle at the center of the target. Not just qualifying, not just expert level. Perfect. Holy shit, someone breathed behind her. Sarah turned to find Kowalski staring at her target, his own forgotten in his hands. His target showed a respectable grouping, most hits within the center ring, a few strays in the next ring out. Good enough to advance, probably, but nothing compared to what Sarah had just done. That's impossible, Kowalski stammered, with a standard M4 in these wind conditions. Physics doesn't care about wind conditions, Sarah said quietly. You just have to account for them. Other shooters were craning their necks to see her target now. The mockery had vanished, replaced by disbelief and, in some faces, grudging respect. But Sergeant Major Brooks, approaching from the equipment desk, still wore his patronizing smile. Well, look at that, he said, examining Sarah's target. Beginner's luck. You must have caught a lull in the wind. There was no lull, Sarah replied. I compensated for the drift. Brooks waved a dismissive hand. Sure. Either way, congratulations on advancing to tomorrow's round. Though I gotta warn you, tomorrow's targets are at 500 meters, and the competition only gets tougher from there. That's when the real shooters separate from the lucky ones. He started to walk away, then paused and called back over his shoulder. And Chen, maybe tomorrow you'll be ready to admit you'd be better off with the equipment suited to your abilities. Sarah watched him go, her jaw tight. The anger burned hotter now, but she kept it contained, controlled, saved. She'd show them tomorrow, she'd show them all. What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know, was that 300 meters was nothing. Child's play. In another life, in a training program that officially didn't exist, Sarah had made shots that would make today's performance look like target practice. But that was classified. That was secret. That was a part of her life she'd locked away 4 years ago when a shattered kneecap had ended her operational career. Or so she'd thought. As she packed up her gear and prepared to leave the range, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. There, in the observation deck overlooking the range, a black government sedan had just pulled up. A man in uniform was stepping out, 3 stars gleaming on his shoulder. A general at a basic qualification range. That was unusual. Sarah shook off the observation and headed for the gate. Whatever a 3-star general was doing at Fort Bragg today, it had nothing to do with her. She was wrong about that. She was very, very wrong. 3 miles away from the rifle range, a black government sedan wound through Fort Bragg's main thoroughfare. In the back seat, Lieutenant General Robert Hartley reviewed briefing documents on his tablet, his reading glasses perched on his nose. At 58, with silver threading through his dark hair and 3 stars on his uniform, Hartley had seen nearly everything the military had to offer. 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, a silver star, a Purple Heart, and more classified operations than he could count. Sir, we're approaching the training facilities, his aide, Captain Morrison, announced from the front passenger seat. Did you want to skip the rifle range? It's just qualifiers today, nothing noteworthy. Hartley glanced up from his tablet, about to agree. His schedule was packed, meetings with the base commander, inspections of new training protocols, a dinner with congressional visitors. He didn't have time to watch basic qualification exercises. But something made him pause, a nagging feeling in his gut, the kind that had saved his life more than once in combat. The old soldier's instinct that whispered when something important was about to happen. "Let's take a look," he said. 5 minutes. Morrison seemed surprised but didn't question the order. The sedan pulled up to the observation deck overlooking the range, and Hartley stepped out into the oppressive heat. The familiar smell of gunpowder hit him immediately, triggering memories of 1,000 different ranges, 1,000 different days of training and testing. Below, dozens of shooters were engaged in their qualifications. Standard stuff, nothing that would normally warrant a general's attention. Captain Morrison brought him a pair of binoculars. "Sir, would you like me to get a roster of today's shooters? See if anyone notable is competing." In a moment, Hartley raised the binoculars and began scanning the lanes. Good shooters, all of them. Marines with textbook form, Rangers with aggressive confidence, SEALs with that peculiar economy of movement that came from years of specialized training, tight groupings, proper breathing, nothing exceptional, just competent soldiers doing competent work. His scan stopped on lane 7. There was something different about this shooter. Smaller than the others, positioned with an economy of movement that seemed almost meditative. The rifle looked oversized against the slight frame, but the way it was handled spoke of deep familiarity. Hartley watched as the shooter, he couldn't tell gender from this distance and angle, completed a series of shots with mechanical precision. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Each shot followed by the briefest pause, then the next round chambered and fired with the same steady rhythm. It reminded him of something, someone. "Who's in lane 7?" Hartley asked, keeping the binoculars trained on the shooter. Morrison checked his tablet, scrolling through the day's roster. Specialist Sarah Chen, sir. Regular Army, 6 years of service. Combat medic specialist with an expert marksmanship qualification. Currently assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division's Medical Battalion. A medic, that was unusual. Combat medics qualified with rifles, of course, but they rarely competed in marksmanship competitions. Their focus was medicine, not shooting. Hartley kept watching as Chen reloaded and resumed position. There was something in her stance, something in the way she controlled her breathing, the methodical micro-adjustment she made to her position before each shot. It wasn't textbook, it was better than textbook. It was the kind of shooting that came from somewhere beyond the standard training manuals. "Pull up her full file," Hartley ordered, an edge of urgency creeping into his voice. Morrison's fingers danced across the tablet screen. Born in San Francisco, California to immigrant parents, enlisted at age 22 after completing 2 years of college, basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, graduated top 10% of her class, advanced to combat medic training at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, graduated with honors. Deployments. 1 deployment to Syria, 8 months in 2020, attached to Special Forces Advisory Unit. Then Germany for 18 months. Returned stateside in early 2022. Medical notation here from 2021, knee injury during. Morrison paused, frowning at the screen. Training exercise. Details are redacted. Severity classified as career-limiting but not discharge qualifying. Underwent 6 months of physical therapy. That word made Hartley's pulse quicken. Redacted. In his 30-plus years of military service, he'd learned that redactions meant one of 2 things: spectacular failure that would embarrass someone important, or spectacular success that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. "Show me the exact dates of that training exercise," Hartley demanded. Morrison scrolled through the file. Injury occurred on November 17, 2021. Location listed as Training Facility, CONUS. No other details available at this clearance level. November 2021. Hartley's mind raced back. Where had he been in November 2021? What had he been doing? Then it hit him like a physical blow. November 2021. He'd been at Coronado, running the 6th cohort of Black Talon training, and there had been an incident, a night jump gone wrong, a candidate whose parachute had malfunctioned, a devastating injury that had ended a promising career before it could truly begin. He'd been told the candidate had survived and been medically discharged from the program. He'd never been given a name. Black Talon protocols maintained strict compartmentalization, but he remembered the incident clearly because it had been the program's first serious injury. Could it be? "I want to see her target," Hartley said, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "Now." They descended from the observation deck to the range floor. The general's presence caused an immediate stir. Shooters straightened. Range officers snapped to attention. Conversations died mid-sentence. Hartley ignored them all, his focus laser-locked on Lane 7, where a slight figure in Army combat uniform was just completing her final shots. The range officer, a master sergeant with 20 years of service, hurried over. "General Hartley, sir, we weren't expecting. I mean, if we'd known you were visiting, we would have prepared a proper." "I'm just observing, Master Sergeant. Carry on." Hartley's eyes never left the small figure at Lane 7. "That shooter there, Chen, I want to see her target when she's finished." "Of course, sir. Right away, sir." Sarah stood and cleared her weapon, setting it down with practiced care. As she turned to retrieve her target from the automated system, Hartley got his first clear look at her face. Young, late 20s as the file had indicated. Asian features, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, dark brown, calm, with an intensity that seemed at odds with her slight build and youthful appearance. The target arrived, and the range officer retrieved it with trembling hands, bringing it to General Hartley. Hartley stared at it in silence that stretched for 10 full seconds. 15 rounds, 300 meters, wind gusting to 15 miles per hour. Every single round had passed through a grouping roughly the size of a silver dollar, with a standard M4 carbine and standard issue ammunition. "Jesus Christ," Captain Morrison whispered, looking over Hartley's shoulder. But Hartley was no longer looking at the target. His attention had shifted to Sarah herself, who was now facing in their direction, clearly aware that a 3-star general was examining her work. As she turned more fully toward them, Hartley's eyes zeroed in on her right shoulder. There, just barely visible beneath the rolled sleeve of her combat uniform, was a mark. A small, faded tattoo that regulations would normally prohibit, but that was old enough and subtle enough to escape casual notice. 3 curved lines, arranged in a specific pattern that Hartley knew intimately. A black talon. His hand moved unconsciously to his own right shoulder, where beneath his uniform shirt, an identical mark lay hidden. A mark he'd earned 7 years ago when he'd been selected to help design and implement the most classified counter-sniper training program in American military history. The world seemed to tilt slightly. All the pieces were falling into place. The redacted injury, the November 2021 date, the extraordinary marksmanship, the mark. This wasn't just any combat medic. This was one of his. This was Black Talon. Hartley's mind flashed back to that cohort, 6 candidates, grueling training, 5 washouts, 1 graduate, the first and only graduate from that particular cycle. He'd never met her, never seen her face. By the time she'd graduated, he'd rotated to a different training facility, but he'd read the reports. The graduate from the 6th cohort had set records, longest confirmed training shot, highest marks in ballistics calculation, perfect score in psychological resilience testing, and then, just months later, the injury that had ended her operational career. He had to be absolutely certain. "Specialist Chen," Hartley called out, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the range like a rifle shot. Sarah turned fully toward him now, and when she saw the 3 stars on his shoulder, she immediately snapped to a textbook position of attention. "Sir." Hartley walked toward her, Morrison trailing behind. Every eye on the range followed the general's progress. Conversations had completely ceased. Even the most arrogant shooters stood at respectful attention. Up close, Hartley could see her more clearly. The slight frame that had drawn so much mockery, the calm, professional demeanor, the old scar on her right knee, barely visible through her uniform pants but there if you knew to look for it. And most importantly, the mark on her shoulder. He could see it clearly now, the 3 curved talons that identified her as one of the most elite operators in the military. "Where did you get that mark?" Hartley asked quietly, gesturing to her shoulder. His tone was conversational, but there was steel beneath it, the absolute expectation of truth. The range had gone completely silent now. Every shooter, every officer, every enlisted personnel was watching this strange confrontation between a 3-star general and a specialist medic. Sarah's eyes flickered to her shoulder, then back to meet Hartley's gaze directly. There was no fear in her expression, no uncertainty, just recognition, understanding. She knew that he knew. "Coronado, sir, 2019. The year was wrong, but Hartley understood immediately. Black Talon training dates were deliberately obscured in all communications. She was giving him the year she'd been recruited, not the year she'd trained. It was the right answer delivered in the correct protocol. Now he was certain. Hartley leaned in close enough that only Sarah and the nearest few personnel could hear him, and whispered the 2 words that would change everything on this range, everything in this moment, everything in Sarah Chen's carefully reconstructed life. Black Talon. The effect of those 2 words was like dropping a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward in waves of shock and confusion. Sarah's posture shifted imperceptibly. Her spine straightened even more if that was possible. Her eyes locked onto the generals with a recognition that went beyond rank and protocol. For a fraction of a second, her carefully maintained mask slipped, revealing something harder underneath, the ghost of the operator she'd once been. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the earthquake those 2 words had triggered. Around them, murmurs erupted like a distant thunderstorm building on the horizon. "What did he say?" "Black what? Is that some kind of code? Did she just confirm something classified?" Sergeant Major Brooks pushed through the growing crowd, his massive frame clearing a path. His face was flushed from the heat and from confusion. "General Hartley, sir, I apologize for not recognizing you immediately. Is there a problem with this specialist?" Hartley turned to face Brooks, and his expression could have flash-frozen molten steel. The temperature on the range seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Yes, Sergeant Major, there is a significant problem. This specialist requested access to competition-grade equipment approximately 1 hour ago, did she not?" Brooks shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that he'd stepped into a minefield. "Well, yes, sir, but given her size and experience level, I made a judgment call that." "You thought wrong." The general's voice was ice wrapped in razors. "Tell me, Sergeant Major, in your 12 years running this range, how much have you learned about Black Talon?" Brooks blinked rapidly, completely off balance. "Sir, I've never heard of it. Is that a new training program, some kind of special qualification?" "Neither has 99% of the military. It's a classified counter-sniper program, Sergeant Major. So classified that most people in this building think it's a myth, a ghost story that special operations personnel tell to scare enemy combatants." Hartley gestured to Sarah without taking his eyes off Brooks. "Black Talon operators are cleared for any weapon system in the United States arsenal. Any system. That includes experimental prototypes. That includes weapons you don't have clearance to know exist. And yes, that certainly includes every rifle in your equipment cage." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, more agitated. Staff Sergeant Kowalski from Lane 6 stepped forward, his earlier confidence replaced by confusion. "Sir, with all due respect, are you saying this specialist, this medic, is some kind of elite sniper?" Hartley finally turned to address the assembled crowd. When he spoke, His voice carried across the range with the authority of 3 decades of command. I'm saying that Specialist Chen here is one of 37 people in the entire world who have completed the most demanding counter-sniper training program ever created by any military in human history. I'm saying she can calculate windage, elevation, Coriolis effect, spin drift, and temperature differential in her head faster than you can unlock your smartphone. I'm saying she's qualified on weapon systems that won't be declassified for another 20 years. He paused, letting that sink in, watching the disbelief war with dawning comprehension on the faces around him. I'm saying, Hartley continued, his voice dropping to a quieter but somehow more intense register, that Specialist Chen can shoot the wings off a fly at 1,500 meters, that she's made confirmed neutralizations at distances where most of you can't even see the target with your naked eyes, that she saved American lives in ways that will never appear in any citation, any medal ceremony, any official record. Captain Morrison had his tablet out, furiously taking notes. The Marine Lance Corporal who'd made the .22 rifle joke earlier looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Even the Navy SEALs, who rarely showed deference to anyone, were standing at respectful attention. Brooks's face had gone from flushed to pale. "Sir, I had no idea. Her file doesn't show any." "Her file shows exactly what it's supposed to show. Combat medic, expert qualification, standard deployments. That's the point, Sergeant Major." Hartley's voice softened slightly, becoming almost educational. Black Talon operatives return to regular duties after training. They blend in. They live normal military lives, indistinguishable from their peers, until they're activated for missions that require their unique skill set. He turned back to Sarah, who had remained at attention throughout this entire exchange, her face carefully neutral. "At ease, Specialist. How long has it been since you've handled a TAC-50? 4 years, 2 months, sir," Sarah replied without hesitation. "And your knee?" "Functional for shooting platforms, sir, not functional for operational deployment." There was no emotion in her voice, but Hartley, who'd spent years reading operators, could hear the old pain beneath the professional tone. He nodded slowly. November 17, 2021, high-altitude insertion training, night jump from 25,000 feet. Around them, the crowd had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to have paused, as if nature itself was listening. "Main chute malfunction," Sarah confirmed quietly. "Reserve deployed at 1,800 feet, still came in too fast. Shattered my patella in 14 places, fractured my tibia, tore my ACL and MCL. 3 surgeries, 6 months of physical therapy." "And you walked away from Black Talon?" "Black Talon walked away from me, sir. Medical discharge from operational status. I couldn't pass the physical requirements anymore." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "So I went back to being a medic." "But you kept shooting." "Yes, sir. It's the one thing they couldn't take away from me." Hartley studied her for a long moment, seeing not just the soldier before him but the operator she'd been, the one who'd set records, exceeded every expectation, and then had it all ripped away by a parachute malfunction and bad luck. He turned to the equipment officer who was standing nearby, frozen like everyone else. "Lieutenant, I want the Macmillan TAC-50, the custom one from the Special Operations Equipment Cage. I want it loaded with match-grade .50 BMG rounds, and I want it here in the next 5 minutes." The equipment officer's eyes went wide. "Sir, that weapon it's reserved for. I'm not sure I have authority to." "I'm giving you authority. Move." The lieutenant practically sprinted toward the equipment building. Hartley addressed the crowd again. "I want this range cleared of all non-essential personnel. If you don't have at least a secret clearance, you need to leave. Now, Captain Morrison, get on the phone to the base commander. Tell him we need security protocols enacted immediately. No one discusses what they see here today. Not with their units, not with their friends, not with anyone. That's not a request, it's an order backed by federal statute. As shooters began reluctantly gathering their equipment and filing out, many casting backward glances at Sarah, Hartley noticed the reactions. Some showed respect. Some showed disbelief. A few showed something that looked like fear, as if they'd just realized they'd been mocking a tiger while thinking it was a house cat. Kowalski approached hesitantly. "Sir, I owe Specialist Chen an apology. I said some things earlier that—" "You did," Hartley interrupted. "And you can apologize later. Right now, I need you to clear the range." As Kowalski retreated, Brooks stepped forward again. The sergeant major looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. "General, sir, I was completely out of line. If I had known—" "That's exactly the problem, Sergeant Major. You didn't know. You made assumptions based on appearance, based on size, based on gender." Hartley's voice wasn't angry anymore. It was disappointed, which was somehow worse. "How many other Sarah Chens have walked through this range? How many other exceptional soldiers have you dismissed because they didn't fit your mental image of what a great shooter should look like?" Brooks had no answer. "I want you to stay," Hartley continued. "I want you to watch what happens next. I want you to see what real excellence looks like so that maybe, you'll think twice before judging the next soldier who doesn't meet your preconceived notions." "Yes, sir," Brooks said quietly. The equipment officer returned, struggling under the weight of a massive rifle case. He set it down carefully at Sarah's feet and opened it with trembling hands. Inside, gleaming against black foam cushioning, was a Macmillan TAC-50, one of the most powerful and accurate sniper rifles ever created. 50 caliber, effective range approaching 2 miles. In the right hands, it could hit targets most shooters couldn't even see. Sarah looked down at the rifle, and for the first time since this whole situation had begun, Hartley saw real emotion cross her face. Longing, recognition, homecoming. "It's been a while since I've handled one of these," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Hartley smiled slightly. "Muscle memory specialist. Your body knows what to do. The question is, does your knee hold up under the platform position?" "Only one way to find out, sir." "Then let's find out." Sarah lifted the Macmillan TAC-50 from its case with the reverence some people reserved for religious artifacts. 26 pounds of precision-engineered steel and composite materials. She ran her hands along the barrel, checking it instinctively, looking for imperfections that wouldn't exist, feeling for temperature variations, testing the bolt action. The remaining personnel on the range, only about 15 now, all with sufficient clearance or rank, watched in hushed silence as she carried the massive rifle to the firing line. The weapon was nearly as long as she was tall, and watching her handle it should have looked absurd. Instead, it looked inevitable, like watching a pianist sit down at a grand piano after years away from the keys. General Hartley stood off to the side with Captain Morrison, who was still taking notes on his tablet. The captain leaned in and spoke quietly. "Sir, I pulled up the Black Talon records, what little I can access at my clearance level. According to this, Specialist Chen held the program record for longest confirmed neutralization, 2,847 meters. Wind gusts up to 25 miles per hour. Temperature inversion creating mirage distortion." "I know," Hartley said, his eyes never leaving Sarah. "I was there when she did it." Morrison's stylus stopped mid-stroke. "You were at Coronado." "I was one of the lead instructors for her cohort. Black Talon runs in rotating groups, only 6 candidates at a time. Maximum secrecy, maximum intensity." Hartley's voice took on a distant quality, remembering. "Chen's cohort started with 3 Marines, 2 Army, and 1 Navy. 4 washed out in the first week. Couldn't handle the physical demands, the mental pressure, the isolation." "And the others?" "1 Marine made it to week 3. Strong shooter, excellent tactical mind. But he had a panic attack during a night exercise, had to engage a simulated target in complete darkness using only sound and memory. He froze, couldn't pull the trigger." Hartley paused. That's not a failure of courage, it's a failure of psychological resilience. Black Talon requires both. And Chen lasted all 37 days, graduated with the highest marks we'd ever recorded up to that point. Hartley's expression showed something between pride and regret. She was also the first woman to complete the program, and for 2 years she was one of our most effective operatives. Morrison watched Sarah as she began setting up her shooting position. She'd moved to the prone platform, carefully arranging her body to support the massive rifle while minimizing the stress on her damaged knee. "What kind of missions?" Morrison asked. "The kind that don't exist on paper. Counter-sniper operations in Syria, Overwatch for high-value target extractions in Afghanistan, training Allied forces in counterinsurgency tactics." Hartley lowered his voice further. 7 operational deployments. 6 American soldiers came home alive because she was watching their backs. 3 enemy snipers who would have killed more of our people were neutralized before they could complete their missions. On the firing line, Sarah had completed her setup. The range officer had placed targets at 800 meters, 1,200 meters, and 1,500 meters, distances that would challenge even Olympic-level competition shooters. Sergeant Major Brooks approached Hartley, his earlier bravado completely gone. "Sir, permission to speak." "Granted. I've been running this range for 12 years. I've seen Marine Scout snipers, Army Special Forces, SEAL Team shooters, the best of the best, but I've never seen targets set at these distances for a basic qualification day." He paused. "What exactly are we about to witness?" Hartley considered his answer carefully. "Sergeant Major, most people think of shooting as a physical skill. Point the weapon, squeeze the trigger, hit the target. But at the distances we're talking about, shooting becomes something else entirely. It becomes applied physics, mathematics, psychology." He gestured towards Sarah, who was now lying behind the rifle, her eye to the scope, her body perfectly still. "At 1,500 meters, nearly a mile, a bullet doesn't fly in a straight line. It follows a parabolic arc, dropping hundreds of inches from point of aim to point of impact. Wind doesn't just push it left or right. It causes spin, drift, vertical deflection, complex three-dimensional movements that change by the millisecond." Brooks listened, transfixed. "Air density matters, temperature matters, humidity matters. The rotation of the Earth matters. Yes, at these distances, you have to account for the Coriolis effect. The bullet spends 3 to 4 seconds in the air, traveling through constantly changing atmospheric conditions." Hartley's voice filled with quiet intensity. "Most shooters couldn't make these calculations with a computer and unlimited time. Black Talon operatives do it in their heads, in seconds, while their life and the lives of their teammates depend on getting it exactly right. And Chen can do this. Chen is one of the best who have ever done this." Sarah's voice carried across the range, clear and professional. "Ready when you are, sir." Hartley nodded to the range officer. "Specialist Chen, you're clear to engage targets when ready, starting with the 800-meter target." Sarah settled deeper into her position. From where Hartley stood, he could see the transformation that came over her, the same transformation he'd witnessed in dozens of Black Talon operatives. The young woman who'd walked onto this range to mockery and dismissal was gone. In her place was something else, something precise, focused, lethal. She closed her eyes for a moment, and Hartley knew she was running her calculations. Wind speed currently gusting at 12 to 15 miles per hour from the southeast. Air temperature 82 degrees. Humidity 67%. Barometric pressure, she'd have memorized it from the morning weather report. Distance 800 meters. 1,000 variables, 1,000 ways to miss. Then her eyes opened, and she looked through the scope. The first shot was apocalyptic. The .50 BMG round left the barrel with a sound like thunder, a massive boom that rolled across the range and echoed off the distant tree line. The recoil, enough to knock an unprepared shooter completely off position, was absorbed through Sarah's body with practiced efficiency, her damaged knee holding despite what must have been significant pain. 800 meters downrange, through the spotting scope, Hartley watched the target shudder. Dead center, perfect hit. Jesus Christ, someone muttered. But Sarah was already adjusting, her hands making minute changes to her position, her breathing slowing to an almost meditative rhythm. The second target beckoned, 200 meters, 4/5 of a mile, a distance where heat shimmer alone could make accurate shooting nearly impossible. She didn't hesitate. Her calculations complete, her confidence absolute, she squeezed the trigger. The second shot rang out, another thunderclap of sound and fury. Through the spotting scope, Hartley watched the impact. 1,200 meters away, the target jolted backward. Center mass, another perfect hit. The remaining personnel were now completely silent, watching something they'd never seen before and might never see again. This wasn't just good shooting. This was the kind of marksmanship that existed in the realm of legend, the stories that circulated through military circles about impossible shots made by ghost operators in classified wars. And now they were watching it happen in real time, on a sun-baked range in North Carolina, executed by a 5'3" woman they'd been mocking less than 2 hours ago. Sarah made another micro-adjustment, her entire body aligned with perfect biomechanical efficiency. The final target waited, 500 meters, nearly a mile. At this distance, the bullet would spend almost 4 full seconds in the air. 4 seconds for the wind to change, for the target to shift, for any of 1,000 variables to turn a perfect shot into a miss. Hartley held his breath. Sarah didn't. Her breathing pattern remained steady, controlled, the rhythm of someone who'd done this so many times that her body knew the cadence without conscious thought. Then with the same smooth, inevitable motion, she squeezed the trigger. The shot seemed to echo across the entire base. 4 seconds passed, 4 seconds that felt like 4 hours to everyone watching. Then, through the spotting scope, Hartley saw the 1,500-meter target jolt backward, a clean hole appearing in the center ring. Hit! For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were processing what they'd just witnessed, trying to reconcile the impossible with the evidence of their own eyes. Then Sergeant Major Brooks started clapping. It started slowly, just his massive hands coming together, but within seconds, everyone else joined in. The remaining shooters, the range officers, even the hardened SEALs who rarely showed approval for anything, they were all applauding. Sarah cleared the rifle with professional efficiency, her movements automatic, and stood. Hartley could see the slight grimace as weight went onto her damaged knee, see the way she shifted her stance to compensate. The injury might have ended her operational career, but it hadn't diminished her skill. Not even close. The applause faded, but the atmosphere on the range had fundamentally changed. The mockery, the dismissiveness, the casual condescension, all of it had evaporated like morning dew under the brutal North Carolina sun. In its place was something Sarah hadn't felt in 4 years: recognition. Not just respect, but genuine awe. General Hartley approached the firing line, his expression unreadable. Not bad for someone who hasn't touched a TAC-50 in 4 years. "Thank you, sir." Sarah's voice remained neutral, but Hartley could see the satisfaction in her eyes. "Actually, I'm understating it. That was exceptional, but you're not done yet." Sarah's eyebrows raised slightly. "Sir, I want to see the 1,500-meter target again, but this time I want 5 consecutive rounds. Show them this wasn't luck." A murmur ran through the crowd. One perfect shot at 1,500 meters could be attributed to favorable conditions, perfect timing, even chance. 5 consecutive shots eliminated every variable except skill. Sarah nodded slowly. "Wind's picking up, sir, gusting to 18 now, maybe 20. "I know, that's why I want to see it." Sarah returned to her position, loading 5 fresh rounds into the magazine. As she settled back into the prone position, Hartley turned to address the assembled personnel. Before she shoots, I want you all to understand what you're about to witness. And to do that, I need to tell you about Black Talon, at least the parts that aren't classified. He had their complete attention. In 2018, there was an incident in Yemen. 3 American military advisors were killed over a 72-hour period by a single enemy sniper. This wasn't random violence. It was surgical. The shooter knew exactly where our people would be, exactly when they'd be vulnerable. He killed them from distances exceeding 1,000 meters in urban terrain with minimal exposure. Captain Morrison pulled up a file on his tablet, ready to take notes. We threw everything at finding this shooter: drones, satellite imagery, SEAL teams, Delta Force. For 3 weeks, the best counter-terrorism assets in the world hunted one man through the streets of Sana'a. Hartley's voice hardened. And he disappeared, vanished like smoke. 3 Americans dead, and we never even saw his face. Sergeant Major Brooks shifted uncomfortably. I remember hearing about Yemen, sir. They told us it was an IED attack. They told you that because the truth was classified. The truth was that we'd been outmatched by an enemy sniper who was better trained, better prepared, and better adapted to the environment than we were. Hartley paused. After Yemen, someone very high up in the chain of command, and I mean very high cabinet level, asked a simple question: why don't we have operators like that? But we do, one of the Navy SEALs interjected. Scout snipers, Special Forces, SEAL snipers. All excellent, all capable, all trained to engage targets at 800 to 1,000 meters in optimal conditions. Hartley gestured to Sarah. But what happens when the conditions aren't optimal? What happens when you need to neutralize a threat at 2,000 meters, in sandstorms, at night, with civilian populations in the line of fire? What happens when the enemy shooter is as well trained as you are, and you're hunting each other through hostile territory? Silence. That's why Black Talon was created. Not to produce more snipers, we have plenty of those. To produce hunter-killers. Operators who could track, identify, and neutralize the world's best enemy snipers in any environment, under any conditions. On the firing line, Sarah had begun her sequence. The first shot thundered out, and 1,500 meters away, the target shuddered with the impact. Hartley continued speaking, his voice carrying over the dying echo of the shot. The program was designed from scratch, not based on existing sniper schools, but on a completely new philosophy. We recruited instructors from everywhere: Olympic marksmen, NASA trajectory specialists, meteorologists, psychologists, even meditation experts. The second shot, another hit. The selection process is invisible. Candidates don't apply for Black Talon. They're identified through a series of tests and scenarios designed to look like routine military activities, a medical procedure that requires unusual steadiness, a navigation exercise that tests spatial awareness, a stress evaluation disguised as a psychological screening. Third shot, the target rocked backward. Once selected, candidates undergo 37 days of the most intensive training imaginable. Not 30 days, not 40, 37. Every single day is designed to break down a specific limitation and rebuild the candidate stronger. Morrison looked up from his tablet. Why 37 specifically, sir? Because the human mind and body need exactly that long to fundamentally rewire ingrained responses. Longer and you risk overtraining. Shorter and the changes don't stick. Hartley watched as Sarah fired the fourth shot. Day 1 is basic marksmanship, shooting until your body learns to ignore pain. Day 7 is advanced mathematics, calculating trajectories without computers. Day 15 is the first elimination test, finding and engaging unknown targets at unknown distances. Fourth shot, perfect. Day 23 is where most candidates fail. We call it the impossible choice. Candidates are put in scenarios where every option violates some rule, some protocol, some moral absolute. We're not testing whether they make the right choice. We're testing whether they can make any choice and live with the consequences. Sarah was lining up her final shot now, her breathing steady despite the physical strain of supporting the massive rifle for an extended period. "And day 37, Brooks asked, completely absorbed in the story. Hartley smiled slightly. "Day 37 is classified, but I can tell you that of the thousands who have been tested for Black Talon since 2018, only 37 have completed the full program. The success rate is less than 1%. The fifth shot rang out. Through the spotting scope, Hartley watched the target jolt backward one final time. When the targets were retrieved, the results left the observers speechless. 5 shots at 1,500 meters, in winds gusting to 20 miles per hour, with a weapon Sarah hadn't touched in 4 years. All 5 rounds within a 4-inch grouping. How, Kowalski breathed, how is that even possible? Sarah stood, clearing the weapon, and turned to face them. For the first time, she spoke to the group directly. It's possible because I spent 37 days learning to ignore everything that told me it was impossible. I learned to trust mathematics over instinct, physics over feeling. I learned that limitations are just parameters, variables in an equation you can solve if you're willing to do the work." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled personnel. "Every one of you has been taught to shoot a certain way, to think a certain way, to believe that certain things are achievable and certain things aren't." Sarah's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Black Talon taught me that those beliefs are lies. The only real limitation is the one you accept." Sergeant Major Brooks stepped forward, and this time there was no condescension, no patronizing tone, just genuine humility. "Specialist Chen, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my respect, which I should have given you from the start before you picked up a rifle." He extended his hand. "You're one of the finest shooters I've ever witnessed. It's been an honor to watch you work." Sarah shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Sergeant Major, and for what it's worth, the mockery doesn't bother me anymore. I've spent 4 years being underestimated. In some ways, it's an advantage." "How so?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Because when people underestimate you, they let their guard down. They get comfortable. They make mistakes. And in my line of work, other people's mistakes create opportunities." General Hartley laughed, a genuine, full-throated sound of approval. "That's Black Talon thinking right there. Turn every disadvantage into an advantage. Use your opponent's assumptions against them." He turned to address the group one final time. "What you've witnessed today stays quiet. The existence of Black Talon remains classified. But the lesson, the fundamental lesson that you can all take with you is this: excellence doesn't come in a standard package. It comes in all sizes, all backgrounds, all forms. Your job as leaders, as trainers, as fellow soldiers is to recognize it when you see it and to never, never let your assumptions blind you to capability." As the crowd dispersed, still buzzing with what they'd witnessed, General Hartley motioned for Sarah to follow him. They walked away from the range toward a quiet area behind the equipment building, Captain Morrison trailing at a respectful distance. "How's the knee really?" Hartley asked once they were out of earshot. Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly. "Hurts like hell, sir. It'll swell up tonight. I'll probably need ice and elevation for the next 12 hours. But you could do it again if you had to." "The shooting? Yes, sir. The parachute jumps, the 30-mile ruck marches, the high-speed vehicle insertions." She shook her head. "No, sir. My operational days are done. The orthopedic surgeon was very clear about that." Hartley nodded, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through several screens before showing Sarah an official-looking document. "This is your current assignment, 82nd Airborne Division, Medical Battalion, treating routine injuries and illnesses. No disrespect to that work, but you're wasted there." "It's what I qualified for, sir." It's what they could see. They looked at your file and saw combat medic with knee injury. They didn't see what I saw today. Hartley pocketed his phone. I'm offering you a reassignment. Permanent instructor position at the Advanced Marksmanship Training Command at Fort Benning, Georgia. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Sir, Let me finish. You be teaching the next generation of military snipers and designated marksmen, not just how to shoot, but how to think, how to see past limitations, how to push through barriers that everyone else accepts as permanent. Hartley's expression grew more serious. It's not operational work, but it might be more important, because every lesson you teach gets multiplied by every student who learns from you. I'm honored, sir, but why me? There are other Black Talon operatives who. Other operatives are still operational. They're in the field doing the work that officially doesn't exist. You're in a unique position, Sarah. You've been where these students want to go. You've done things they can only imagine. But you're also here, stateside, available to teach. He paused. And you face something most operators never face, losing it all and having to rebuild. Sarah felt the weight of those words. The injury, the medical discharge, the slow, painful transition from elite operator to regular soldier, the identity crisis, the grief. That experience, that loss, it's given you perspective that operational shooters don't have, Hartley continued. You know what it's like to have your entire purpose stripped away, and you know what it's like to find a new one. That's what makes you the right person for this job. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing. Behind them, she could hear the range beginning to resume normal operations, the sound of rifles and shouted commands drifting on the wind. What would the position actually entail? She asked finally. You'd run the Advanced Marksmanship Instructor course, 12 weeks, 4 times a year. You take experienced shooters from all service branches and teach them how to teach. But more than that, Hartley glanced at Morrison, who nodded and pulled up another file on his tablet. You'd be helping to develop the next generation of Black Talon selection and training protocols. That caught Sarah's full attention, sir. Morrison spoke for the first time. The program is expanding, Specialist Chen. The global threat environment has evolved. We need more counter-sniper capabilities than 37 operatives can provide. General Hartley and Director Vance, who oversees Black Talon from the civilian side, believe the program needs to scale up without losing quality. We need you to help build the framework, Hartley added. Selection criteria, training curriculum, evaluation methods. You'd have a team, of course, but the vision would be yours. Sarah's mind was racing. This wasn't just a teaching position. This was a chance to shape the future of the program that had defined her, to ensure that the next generation of operators would be better prepared, better selected, better trained. There's one more thing, Hartley said quietly. This comes with a promotion to sergeant and an increase in clearance level. You'd report directly to Director Vance and to me. Your work would remain largely classified, but you'd have significant autonomy. And if I say no, then you go back to your medical battalion and I'll find someone else. No hard feelings, no repercussions. Hartley met her eyes. But I don't think you'll say no, because I saw your face when you were behind that rifle, Sarah. That wasn't just a good shooter hitting targets. That was someone coming home. He was right, and they both knew it. For 4 years, Sarah had been going through the motions, treating sprained ankles and common colds, qualifying expert every year on ranges like this one, living a half-life that didn't acknowledge what she'd once been. Today, for the first time since the injury, she'd felt whole again. I have conditions, Sarah said. Hartley smiled. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. What are they? If I'm designing selection and training protocols, I do it my way. That means opening Black Talon to more diverse candidates. It means evaluating people on potential and capability, not on whether they fit some predetermined profile. Agreed. What else? I want to make sure we're not just training killers. Black Talon operatives need to be thoughtful, ethical, capable of making impossible decisions. The training has to include moral reasoning, not just technical skills. Also agreed. Director Vance specifically mentioned that as a priority. Sarah took a deep breath. And I want to be able to mentor the candidates personally. Not just design the program and walk away. I want to be there, watching them struggle and succeed, helping them become something they didn't know they could be. Hartley extended his hand. Then we have a deal. Welcome to Advanced Marksmanship Training Command, Sergeant Chen. Sarah shook his hand, feeling the surreal nature of the moment. 6 hours ago, she'd walked onto this range expecting another routine qualification day. Now her entire career trajectory had changed. When do I start, sir? You've got 2 weeks. That gives you time to finish up here at Bragg, say your goodbyes, and relocate to Bennying. Your first instructor course begins 3 weeks from today. Morrison pulled up a calendar on his tablet. We've already received preliminary applications from 32 candidates, mix of Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. We'll need to narrow that down to 20 for the first class. 32 applicants for a 12-week instructor course. Sarah was surprised. That's unusually high interest. Word travels fast in certain circles, Hartley said cryptically. What you did today, what you represented, it resonated with people. Shooters who have felt overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. They see you as proof that the system can change. Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She wasn't just taking a teaching job. She was becoming a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. No pressure, Morrison added with a slight smile. But the future of Black Talon's evolution kind of depends on you not screwing this up. Sarah laughed despite herself. Well, when you put it that way. Hartley's expression grew more serious. Sarah, I need you to understand something. This opportunity exists because of what happened today, because you were willing to step onto this range and prove yourself despite the mockery. But once you're at Bennying, once you're designing programs and training instructors, the challenges won't stop. You'll face skepticism from people who think Black Talon should stay exactly as it is. You'll deal with resistance from commanders who don't want to change their selection criteria. You'll have to fight for every inch of progress. I understand, sir. I don't think you do, not yet, Hartley's voice softened. The demonstration was the easy part. What comes next, changing minds, reshaping culture, building something that lasts, that's the hard part. That's the work that breaks people. Sarah thought about the 37 days at Coronado, thought about the injury and the recovery, thought about 4 years of being invisible, overlooked, forgotten. Sir, with all due respect, I've already been broken. I know what that feels like, and I also know what it takes to put yourself back together. She stood a little straighter despite the throbbing in her knee. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm afraid of wasting my potential. This opportunity, it's the opposite of that. Hartley studied her for a moment, then nodded with satisfaction. All right then. Captain Morrison will send you the preliminary paperwork tonight. Read through it, ask questions if you have them, and we'll make this official. As they walked back toward the range entrance, Sarah noticed that several shooters had lingered, ostensibly cleaning equipment but clearly waiting for another glimpse of her. Among them was Staff Sergeant Kowalski, who approached hesitantly. Specialist Chen, I just wanted to say. It's okay, Sarah interrupted gently. No, it's not. I was a complete ass, made assumptions, said things that were way out of line. Kowalski shook his head. You deserved better. You know what helped me today? Sarah asked. All those comments, all that mockery, it gave me fuel, motivation, a reason to prove everyone wrong. She smiled slightly. So, in a weird way, thank you. Kowalski blinked in surprise. That's surprisingly gracious. Anger is useful, but forgiveness is powerful. Sarah shrugged. Besides, you're going to tell this story about the day you underestimated someone and learned a valuable lesson. And maybe, just maybe, The next time you see a soldier who doesn't fit your expectations, you'll remember this moment and give them a fair shot." "I will," Kowalski promised. "Absolutely." As Sarah finally left the range, heading back to her barracks to ice her knee and process everything that had happened, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, purpose. The sense that her best days weren't behind her, they were still ahead, just in a different form than she'd originally imagined. The black Talon mark on her shoulder seemed to pulse with renewed significance. She'd earned it through pain and perseverance. Now she was going to help others earn theirs. News of what happened at the rifle range spread through Fort Bragg like wildfire, though the details remained carefully classified. By evening, every barracks, every mess hall, every corner of the base buzzed with variations of the same story. The medic who turned out to be a secret super sniper. The woman they'd mocked, who put on a demonstration that left a 3-star general speechless. Sarah returned to her barracks to find her roommate, Specialist Jessica Martinez, sitting on her bunk with wide eyes. "Is it true?" Martinez asked immediately. "Did you really shoot a target from a mile away, with a rifle that weighs more than you?" Sarah set down her gear bag, wincing as her knee protested. "Yes." "Holy shit, Sarah. Holy shit." Martinez stood up, packing. "People are saying you're some kind of elite sniper, that you've killed people from distances where they couldn't even see you, that you're part of a program so secret most generals don't know it exists." "Some of that is exaggeration." Sarah sat carefully on her own bunk, already feeling the inflammation building in her knee. "But not all of it." Martinez stared at her. They'd been roommates for 8 months, sharing the mundane details of daily military life, complaining about duty rosters, watching movies on laptops, talking about their families back home. And the whole time, Sarah had been carrying this massive secret. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I couldn't, and because it didn't matter." Sarah started unlacing her boots. "That part of my life was over. I was just trying to be a good medic, do my job, move forward." "Was?" Sarah paused. "General Hartley offered me a new assignment, Fort Benning. I'll be training instructors." "You're leaving." Martinez's voice was flat. "In 2 weeks." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Finally, Martinez spoke again, her voice softer. "I'm going to miss you, even though apparently I never really knew you." "You knew me, Jess. The me that exists now, the medic, the roommate, the person who burns popcorn in the microwave and sings off-key in the shower. That's real too." Sarah met her eyes. "The operator I used to be, that was a different version of me. Both are true." Over the next few days, Sarah experienced a strange shift in how people treated her. Soldiers who'd barely acknowledged her before now stopped to shake her hand. Officers who'd walked past her without a second glance now nodded respectfully. The change was disorienting, flattering and uncomfortable in equal measure. But the most meaningful moment came 3 days after the demonstration. Sarah was in the physical therapy clinic, working on her knee exercises, when Sergeant Major Brooks walked in. He looked uncertain, uncomfortable, emotions that didn't fit his massive frame. "Specialist Chen, got a minute?" "Of course, Sergeant Major." Brooks gestured to the empty hallway outside the clinic. They stepped out, and Sarah noticed he was carrying a small frame, a photograph. "My daughter Maria," he said, showing Sarah the picture. "She's 17, wants to be a Marine." Sarah looked at the photo. Maria was small, barely 5 feet tall, with bright eyes and a determined expression that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. "She looks fierce," Sarah observed. "She is, tough as they come, but she's worried." Brooks's voice cracked slightly. "Worried that when she gets to boot camp they'll judge her before she even gets started, that they'll see her size and write her off." He looked directly at Sarah now, and she saw genuine emotion in his eyes. "I called her last night, told her about what I saw on that range, told her about you, how you walked in there facing mockery and dismissal, and you just destroyed every assumption we had, every single one. Sarah waited, sensing he had more to say. She asked if she could meet you before you leave for Bennying. I know that's a lot to ask, but Brooks paused, struggling. I need her to see that someone like her can not just survive in the military but excel, that the people who doubt her are wrong. Sarah felt a lump forming in her throat. I'd be honored to meet her, Sergeant Major. The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at a coffee shop off base. Maria Brooks arrived with her father, nervous energy radiating from her small frame. She shook Sarah's hand with a grip that was probably meant to be firm, but came across as desperately hopeful. Brooks excused himself after introductions, leaving them alone. Dad said you're the best shooter he's ever seen, Maria began, stirring her coffee with unnecessary intensity. He said you made shots that shouldn't be possible. Your dad was being generous. I'm good at what I do because I worked hard and never gave up. That's all. But you're so, Maria gestured helplessly, small like me. How did you get people to take you seriously? Sarah leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Maria, I'm going to tell you something important and I need you to really hear it. People will absolutely judge you based on your size. Some drill instructors will see you and think you can't hack it. Some of your fellow recruits will assume you're weak. This will happen. It's not fair, but it's real. Maria's face fell. But here's what they won't know, Sarah continued. They won't know that being small makes you harder to hit, that having to work twice as hard to prove yourself makes you twice as determined, that every single time someone underestimates you, you get a chance to exceed their expectations. She pulled out her phone and showed Maria a photo, her target from the 1,500-meter demonstration, 5 rounds clustered impossibly tight. I did this after being told I couldn't handle the rifle, after being laughed at, after being called little lady and honey and every other condescending thing you can imagine. Sarah's eyes locked onto Maria's. And you know what? That mockery fueled me. It gave me something to prove, not to them, to myself. What if I fail? Then you fail, get up and try again. I've failed plenty. The difference between success and failure isn't whether you fall down, it's whether you stay down. They talked for over an hour. Sarah shared carefully edited stories from her training, explained the importance of mental toughness, discussed finding mentors who believed in potential rather than judging on appearance. When they finally parted, Maria hugged her tightly. Thank you, Dad was right. You're exactly who I needed to talk to. Your dad is a good man who learned an important lesson, Sarah said. Tell him to keep learning. We all should. The final days at Fort Bragg passed quickly. Sarah completed her out-processing paperwork, said goodbye to patients she'd treated, packed up her belongings. The Army was efficient at endings, clean, bureaucratic, emotionless. But on her last day, something unexpected happened. Sarah was loading her car, preparing for the drive to Georgia, when she heard a commotion near the barracks. She turned to find approximately 50 soldiers assembled in formation, people from her medical unit, from the rifle range, from various commands across the base. Sergeant Major Brooks stood at the front. When he saw Sarah, he called the formation to attention. Specialist Chen, he announced formally, his voice carrying across the parking lot. The soldiers of Fort Bragg would like to render honors. It wasn't official. Sarah wasn't important enough for that, and the classified nature of her work prevented formal recognition. But as she stood there, these 50 soldiers who'd witnessed or heard about what she'd accomplished saluted her in unison. Sarah returned the salute, her throat tight with unexpected emotion. After the formation broke, soldiers approached individually. Handshakes, thank yous, promises to tell the story to others. One young private, a woman barely out of basic training, approached shyly. Ma'am, I was thinking about quitting. People kept telling me I wasn't tough enough, wasn't strong enough, but after hearing what you did, she paused, finding her words. I realized they were wrong, so I'm staying. Good, Sarah said firmly, her voice thick. The army needs you. Don't let anyone tell you different. As she drove away from Fort Bragg for the last time, Sarah glanced in her rearview mirror at the base disappearing behind her. 6 years of her life lived there. Countless memories, some painful, some beautiful, all formative. The girl who'd enlisted at 22, eager but uncertain, was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, more focused. Someone who'd been broken and rebuilt. Someone who understood that excellence wasn't about fitting in, it was about standing out in ways that mattered. Her phone buzzed. A message from General Hartley, office ready at Bennying. First instructor class arrives in 2 weeks. No pressure, but you're about to shape the future of military marksmanship. Don't screw it up. Sarah smiled and accelerated onto the highway, heading south toward Georgia and toward a future she was going to build one lesson, one student, one exceeded expectation at a time. The black Talon mark on her shoulder had been earned through blood and determination. Now she was going to help others earn theirs, not by making it easier, but by showing them that the only real limitations were the ones they accepted. Sometimes the best response to doubt wasn't anger. It was simply excellence. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood at the front of a classroom at Fort Benning, Georgia, looking out at 32 faces, 23 men and 9 women, all experienced military marksmen selected for the Advanced Precision Shooting Instructor course. They looked confident. Some looked cocky. A few had that particular brand of arrogance that came from being told repeatedly they were among the best shooters in their units. Sarah let the silence stretch, watching them assess her. She could practically hear their thoughts. She's the instructor. She's so young, so small. This is the legendary Black Talon operative. She'd seen these expressions before. 6 months ago, on a rifle range in North Carolina. Finally, she spoke. My name is Sergeant Sarah Chen. Over the next 12 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to be better shooting instructors. Not just competent, transformative. By the time you leave this course, you'll understand marksmanship at a level that goes beyond technique and enters the realm of physics, psychology, and philosophy. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with footage, grainy cell phone video from Fort Bragg, showing her demonstration with the Macmillan TAC-50, the 2,000-meter shot that had changed everything. But before we begin, I want to tell you a story about assumptions. Sarah recounted the events at Fort Bragg, not the classified Black Talon details, but the essential truth. Walking onto a range, being dismissed and mocked, proving every doubter wrong. I'm telling you this because every one of you will eventually train someone who doesn't fit your mental image of what a great shooter looks like. Someone too small, too young, too old, wrong gender, wrong background, too something. She paused, letting that sink in. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. You can be like the people who mocked me, or you can be like General Hartley, someone who looked past appearances and saw capability. A Marine captain in the front row raised his hand. Sergeant, how do we identify natural talent? You don't, because natural talent is overrated. Sarah pulled up a slide showing complex ballistics equations. What you identify is hunger, willingness to work. The best shooter I ever trained with wasn't naturally gifted. He had mediocre eyesight, shaky hands, terrible spatial reasoning. But he wanted it more than anyone else. He practiced until his fingers bled. He studied until he could recite wind deflection formulas in his sleep. What happened to him? Someone asked. He's currently deployed. Classified location, classified mission. But he's alive and keeping other people alive because he refused to accept his limitations as permanent. Sarah's voice softened. That's what we're teaching, not just shooting, but the refusal to accept limitations. Over the following weeks, Sarah pushed her students harder than they'd ever been pushed. She taught them how to diagnose shooting problems by watching body mechanics, how to build confidence without breeding arrogance, how to customize equipment for different body types rather than forcing everyone into the same mold. She also taught things that weren't in any manual. During week 4, when a sergeant insisted that women couldn't handle heavy recoil, Sarah took him to the range and demonstrated positions that used body mechanics rather than mass for stability. Then she had a female student, barely 5'2", outshoot him with a Barrett M82. When a Navy instructor argued that you couldn't teach creativity in shooting, Sarah gave him a scenario: neutralize a target with only 3 rounds, high wind, and a damaged scope. Textbook solutions won't save you here. Adaptability will. The resistance gradually transformed into respect. By week 8, students who'd arrived thinking they knew everything were asking questions like beginners, hungry to learn more. During week 10, Director Patricia Vance visited unannounced. She sat in the back as Sarah taught advanced environmental reading, how to use grass movement, heat shimmer, even bird flight patterns to predict wind changes. After class, Vance pulled Sarah aside. "That was remarkable. You're not just teaching them to shoot, you're teaching them to think." "That's what Black Talon taught me, ma'am. The technical skills matter, but the mindset matters more." Vance nodded approvingly. "I have news. The first official Black Talon candidate evaluation program begins in 4 months. We want you to design it." Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility, all of it. Selection criteria, evaluation protocols, training curriculum. You'll have support, but the vision is yours. Vance paused. "This is what you were being prepared for, Sarah, not just to be an operative, but to shape the next generation." That night, Sarah began designing the framework. She filled notebooks with ideas, drawing on her experience and the lessons learned from teaching. Black Talon Candidate Evaluation Framework. Core principle: elite capability exists in unexpected places. Our job is to find it, not screen it out based on preconceptions. She wrote evaluation standards that measured capability rather than conformity. Psychological assessments that identified resilience over aggression. Technical tests that revealed problem solving, not just existing knowledge. By week 12, her instructor students had transformed. The final practical test required each to take a volunteer with 0 shooting experience and, in 4 hours, get them to hit a target at 100 meters 5 consecutive times. Every single student succeeded. During the graduation ceremony, attended by General Hartley and several high-ranking officials, Sarah addressed her students one final time. "You came here to learn how to teach shooting, but what I hope you've actually learned is how to see past assumptions. Every soldier who enters your classroom brings their own story, their own challenges, their own potential. Your job isn't to judge them, it's to unlock what's already there." After the ceremony, Captain Morrison showed her something on his tablet. This has been circulating on internal military networks. The Fort Bragg video again, but now with updated text. They told her she couldn't handle the rifle. They were wrong. Never judge capability by appearance. Never let anyone tell you you're not good enough. If you want it, earn it. Excellence doesn't have a standard package. The video had been viewed over 500,000 times by military personnel worldwide. "It's become required viewing for all new drill instructors," Morrison explained. "They're using it to teach about unconscious bias." Sarah stared at the screen, processing the magnitude of what had started 6 months ago with mockery on a rifle range. "There's more," Morrison continued. "Applications from women to advanced sniper programs have increased 60%. 3 service branches have revised their physical standards to focus on capability over arbitrary measurements. And we've received over 400 applications requesting evaluation for specialized programs." That evening, an encrypted message appeared on Sarah's secure terminal. "First Black Talon evaluation begins next month. 26 candidates from all branches, 9 women, 5 under 56, 3 over 40, 1 former college professor who enlisted at 35, On paper, half don't fit traditional profiles. In reality, they all tested exceptional for what actually matters. This is your vision becoming reality. Hartley. Sarah smiled and opened her notebook. 1 month to finalize everything. 1 month to ensure the next generation would be chosen for capability, not conformity. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the unmarked building near Coronado, watching 26 candidates assemble, including Sergeant Major Brooks's daughter, Maria, whose scores had flagged her for evaluation. When Maria spotted Sarah, her face lit up with recognition and gratitude. Director Vance addressed the candidates. "Welcome to Black Talon. Most of you won't make it to graduation. Those who do will join one of the most elite programs in the world." She gestured to Sarah. "Your lead instructor is Sergeant Chen. She holds the program record for longest confirmed neutralization. She designed this evaluation framework. She knows what it takes because she's done it." Sarah stepped forward, meeting 26 pairs of eyes, some confident, some nervous, all determined. "Day 1 begins in 6 hours, she announced. "Between now and then, write down your biggest fear about this program, because over the next 37 days you're going to face that fear directly. You'll confront it, overcome it, or wash out. There's no middle ground." Maria raised her hand. "Sergeant Chen, what was your biggest fear?" Sarah considered carefully. "I was afraid I wasn't good enough, that everyone who'd mocked me was right, that I'd gotten this far on luck." "What did you do?" "I decided that even if I failed, I'd fail at my absolute best. That decision freed me, because once you commit to giving everything, fear loses its power." Over 37 days, Sarah pushed them harder than they'd ever been pushed. She taught shooting in impossible conditions, mathematics and meteorology, decision-making under crushing stress. But more than that, she taught them to exceed their own expectations. The college professor learned to hit targets at 1,000 meters. The small Navy SEAL mastered high-altitude insertions. Maria became one of the most naturally gifted shooters in the cohort. On day 37, 19 candidates graduated, a 73% success rate compared to the previous 12% average. At the ceremony, Sarah personally applied the Black Talon mark to Maria's shoulder. "Your father would be proud, I'm proud, but most importantly, you should be proud. You earned this." Afterward, Director Vance approached. 19 graduates from 26 candidates. You've revolutionized the program. "Better selection plus better instruction equals better results," Sarah replied. "The Department of Defense has approved expansion, 3 cohorts per year. You'll lead all of them." Later, Sarah received another message from Hartley. The Fort Bragg video was now required viewing for all military instructors. Applications from diverse candidates had exploded. Standards were being rewritten across all branches. One demonstration on a rifle range had sparked a transformation rippling through the entire military. As Sarah stood watching her first graduating class celebrate, she touched the mark on her own shoulder. She'd earned it through pain and perseverance. Now she'd helped 19 others earn theirs. The mockery at Fort Bragg had been meant to diminish her. Instead, it had revealed her and sparked a revolution. Sometimes the best response to doubt wasn't anger or defensiveness. It was simply excellence, pure, undeniable, impossible to ignore excellence. She'd shown them what she could do. Now she was teaching others to do the same. The legacy wasn't in the shots she'd made, but in the shooters she'd created. And that legacy was just beginning.